In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today, I'm going to have a conversation with Adrian, and he's going to talk about AI and AI from the perspective of the VC world and investing. And Adrian is the founder and general partner at Mendoza Ventures, which is both Latinx and woman-owned, and the first Latinx founded VC fund on the East Coast. His firm focuses on investments in Fintech, AI, and cybersecurity, with diversity playing an important role in their investment decisions. About 80% of their portfolio consists of startups led by immigrants, people of color, and women. And I'm very happy that and grateful to you, Adrian, for spending some time talking to me today. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Emanuel. Thanks for having me on, man.
You betcha. First thing I want to know is how did you get into the dirty business of venture capital?
You know what? Before being in VC, so we're coming up to our 9th year anniversary, January next year.
Congratulations.
It's like, I'll talk about this. It'll be like 9 years and 9 minutes. But prior to this, I was a founder. I had 2 VC-backed companies.
Yep.
One in ad tech, one in analytics. And so I knew of the VC world from being a guy that was pitching.
Nice.
And then, our company went into acquisition mode in 2015, and the board said, go find something to do. And it happened to be investing. So, so I went into that world. I went to the dark side.
All right. That's great. What a neat change it must have been for you, though, to be on the other side of that.
Well, it was great. A friend of mine once told me, who was another founder, and he said, man, I could never do what you do, just because he's like, I'm so focused on a problem. And I said, no, I love what I do because I'm at that 10,000 foot level view.
Yep.
I'm no longer looking down on the weeds. I'm looking up, and I'm not just looking at one business. I'm looking at multiple businesses.
Sure.
And I'm looking at markets. I'm looking at sectors. I'm looking at trends. And I love being there. That's, I think, where I do the best as a very early stage founder, because that's the spot in business and building a business that always got me excited.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's always amazing when you find your spot and then you're dug in for 9 years and you're probably looking forward to the next 9 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Well, one of the things that we've seen since ChatGPT has become retail, essentially, is that there's a lot of software out there that's claiming to be AI or is just APIing into chat or something like that from one of the LLMs. So then what are you looking for when you're looking at projects, and how much technology that's IP for a software company before you're willing to start having a conversation?
Yeah, I kind of like to break this world out into 3 parts.
Okay.
The first is the ChatGPT, the front end. There's a pile of front end applications. I'll kind of talk about 3, and then I'll kind of see where the problems are in each. So there's the front end. Then there's sort of that middle office, which are the LLM land.
Yep.
And then, that's the Lambdas, the OpenAI. And then there's the back office.
Yep.
And that's all data, training data, all of that, where there's still a lot. But truth being, when you look at it, my goal of investor and as founder is looking for risk.
Right.
And so on the front end, a lot of what's happened is all of these are tied together. If your LLM is off, if your data is off, or your front end is off, the whole thing falls apart.
Sure.
And right now it's being stuck together by duct tape and gum. And the reality is, a lot of the front end applications, they're using out of the can LLMs. They're
Yep.
using, whatever they're doing. They're Lambda, they're using ChatGPT, they're using any of the things that are out there, but they're not proprietary. So right now, that's your connection into the data side. My prediction is in the next year or two, whoever wins some of the licensing of data sources is going to win. Because no one's licensed out Reddit yet. No one's licensed out Twitter yet. And that's where true conversations are happening. And so because of that, in LLM land and in front office land, there's issues with hallucination.
Sure.
So perfect example. Like we always go in and test out an LLM, and we do this as investors anyways, is we'll ask it a stupid question. Like, we have a plush dog that's our mascot. I got him right here. We got like VC Puppy. And so I asked Google Bard, who is VC Puppy? And so it ended up giving me a response. And the first response was, VC Puppy is a real dog that is active in social media. And I was like, because it took the name from Twitter, real VC Puppy, and it just expanded on it, hallucinated on it, just made stuff up. And then it kept on going. And it said, "Oh, VC Puppy is a term of endearment in the finance industry for a young go-getter in venture capital." I mean, at this point, it's kind of like, imagine if you're having a conversation with someone and they start rambling.
Yeah, right.
Now the LLM is rambling, and it even uses an example. That guy is a real VC Puppy. And all of a sudden, Google, because of this, things like examples like this, it gets deprecated.
Right.
You ask OpenAI, you ask ChatGPT, nothing. Just recently, another investor called me and said, hey, by the way, they just pushed a new version out, and I asked it that question. So they went on ChatGPT, who is VC Puppy? It actually came back with an answer. Before, it would say, I don't know. Now it's hallucinated again, and it said VC Puppy is a pseudonym for an employee at Mendoza Ventures that happens to be a senior associate. This is not common in the industry. And so the problem is when you're building consumer retail facing app, if you're doing something, i.e. job post, i.e., someone asks it a simple question, you're going to start getting really good results.
Right.
If you were to say, hey, I want a job description for a project manager, a product manager, computer scientist, then you're going to get the most incredible thing because you've got millions and millions and millions of rows of data.
Yeah.
Well, when you start, one of the things that, sort of recent research has come out is when you ask an LLM a more random question, it's going to actually throw its thinking process off, and you're going to start getting outliers. So when we're looking at companies, we're looking at, what are you using? Are you just betting the house on one LLM? Are you using several? And then on the LLM side, are you building your own LLM, which you shouldn't have to, because the reality is like there's enough out there.
Yep.
Are you building a model factory? Are you going through multiple, or are you just using one? But the bigger issue that we're still finding is on the data side, because in the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing the crossover from the retail onto the enterprise. Mm-hmm. Because right now, some of these enterprises, their employees are already using the retail version of ChatGPT to write their reports, to ingest it data. A lot of these enterprises are realizing, oh, my stuff is getting out there. I've got to control it.
Yeah.
And the only way to do it is to start bringing in your own LLM, start bringing in your own front end applications over your own data. But the problem is, if you're dealing with something like insurance claim data, medical records, health, you can't hallucinate.
Yeah.
So you've got to start looking at different LLMs, or finding ability to sort of figure out which one will work for you, and why was the decisioning made.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And in addition to hallucinations in that situation, you also have HIPAA compliance and IP and all these things that you don't want to leak out. So how are you seeing that companies are managing that part?
Well, part of it is, when you look at HIPAA works if it's a dual handshake. If I agree to give you the data and you agree to send it back, then we have a HIPAA compliant handshake.
Right.
The reality right now is what we're seeing is people haven't really people are still hoarding data. If you look at insurance companies, you look, sort of the financial services industry, we're sitting on mountains of data. Whether or not any of that is useful, not really.
Right.
Because it's not actionable. It still has to be labeled. It has to still be cleaned. This is why when you look at things like Snowflake, why all these sort of big data aggregators really did really well, because the data was garbage. We're still in this situation of garbage in, garbage out.
Gotcha.
And so even though there's this fear of everyone saying, what about, our HIPAA data? What about our PII data? Dude, most of this hasn't been tied together to actually get it to do anything useful for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we still are, is we still are not seeing these enterprise layer, enterprise ready, because the infrastructure of itself, of taking a data center, taking a data lake and ingesting it or putting it together.
Yeah, that's interesting. What projects are you involved in right now that you think have got the most legs, the most potential?
You know what is a lot of our recent investments have all been at the infrastructure layer. We invested in a company called Praxi.ai that's all about labeling metadata. They've got a diversity and a PII filter to scrub things out, because part of it is you still have to associate objects, because our biggest issue right now with data is there's still no characteristics to be able to tell it when you're asking a question to make a reference to what do you want to actually know. Because if, let's say, someone says for a life insurance, customer A submitted a claim, there isn't enough metadata to be able to describe what was that claim about. Was it health, medical? Did it cause for, was it a bike accident, a car accident? So all of this data has to be labeled, transformed, so that if you want it from the front end, right, show me all of the claims of a person that was hit by a car this year. Right now, we're not able to do that. So a lot of our investments have been on how do we get data enterprise ready, and then be able to add the next generation of ChatGPT, which is something referred to as RAG. Real-time augmented generation, that's really looking at probably the smallest amount of hallucination that you can get compared to modern LLMs. And we're also looking at other decisioning trees. Like, we're looking at a company now that's using neural networks, so that you are using some decisions that can be done on an LLM, but some decisions that have to be used on a neural network to make an actual decision.
Right. So we're about 2 years into the hype and the bubble of this thing. How much more time do you think we have kind of on the upside before it becomes enculturated into business, and kind of past the bubble phase?
I think we've been investing in AI since 2016, and this is sort of bubble 2.
Right.
Bubble 1 was everyone sticking .ai, everyone saying, I've got a machine learning algorithm, or I've got sentiment analysis. But it all came down to there wasn't enough data. Right. In order to make a decision, you need 10,000 data points in order to get to statistical significance. That's how you remove hallucination. And so then all of a sudden in that first bubble, you saw a lot more emphasis on training data and sort of computer, into computer vision, into sentiment analysis. So much was like these models were forgotten. So now what's happened is bubble 2 comes along, and it's fueled by a front end.
Yep.
So where before there wasn't front ends, now you've got an excitement over, I can use a front end, whether it be at a bank, whether it be at, any type of, endpoint where someone is, wants to ask questions. This is what's proved it out. And truth being, what's happened is the more people ask questions, the more people submit, the LLMs are being trained by our own questions.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because we've kind of nipped that into, we now have training data. But then the hallucination part is still massive because it's trying to appease us by not telling us no.
Right.
We're consumers. We like to consume. If it said no, I don't know who VC Puppy is, I'll go to the next LLM.
Right.
Now it's like, now I'm just going to tell you, hey, clearly you want this answer, I'm going to give it to you, whether it's accurate or wrong. And this is where you've seen things like lawyers using ChatGPT and using made up citations
Right.
for the law. And that's where things were sort of starting to creep in. So I love that the fact that there's an excitement. We're an investor in a company called Senso.ai out of Canada. Like one of the top data science teams in the country in Canada. These guys are crushing it. ChatGPT comes out. They were building reports for everybody. They had like 10, 12 data scientists. One morning, the CEO says, you know what, guys? We're building all these reports. I'm just going to build a front end to be able to ask it questions.
Right.
Guess what? Companies down to 2 to 3 people. Now they're selling like hotcakes to all of the banks and credit unions. And they're going to the support people. They're going to the people that are picking up the phone calls. They're going to the people at the front desk. And now no more reports, no more whiskers, box plots. All of that's gone. They're just going into a texting and it's just, they're doing great.
Yeah.
But like that's this thing of you need people to start thinking about who's our actual customer here and what do they need? They need to be able to just stand in front of a computer when someone walks in and ask it a question.
Right. But what tools are you using in your daily work that we might be able to emulate?
Oh, I'll use a good one. And
Okay.
you guys can go online and check this out. There is a Notebook LM.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic because what it did is one of my founders came up to me and said, you should try it. So I logged in and what it did, it says, hey, give me some data sources. So I pulled out our website. I pulled out one of our decks, one of our marketing materials.
Yeah.
And what it did is it built an entire podcast around us. And it's on our website. And it's a podcast on us, talking about us, with all the conversational things we're having now. Yeah, okay, I like that idea. Like all of these little things that make it sound, and I loved it. I was listening to this. I was like, man, this describes us down to a T. So I put it on the website. And I'm like, people are always asking us, hey, what podcast should I listen to? So we just made up a podcast.
Yeah.
The AI podcast with a picture of AI photos. And then the other thing we use all the time is we use it for photo editing. Like there's a couple of pictures where we had one person, we're like, go into Photoshop, use our AI filter. 90% of the time it works when you tell it to remove a person from a photograph or clean up a background. The other 10%, it'll put like a random statue or a tire. And you're like, what?
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute. But all it's doing is it's improving efficiency, because all of this someone would have to do. Really getting rid of a person in the background, all of that can be done quickly. But now all of that we're starting to see in the new iOS that's coming out this month. All of these AI filter replacements are all being embedded into the Apple iOS.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most interesting things about this phase, right? Is that there's these cool tools that get built up, and then it gets baked into the bigger tools that we're already using, and there's this kind of constant innovation that's happening for, Asana or Salesforce or any of the smartphones. So it's amazing to see how these little innovations get integrated, and then it pushes the next level of integration or innovation rather.
Well, but I think what it does, especially on the marketing side, is it creates a base layer to start from. And think of it as, I like to describe where we are with AI as where we were with like Getty Images 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
When you now had stock photography and everybody's talking about, oh my God, this is going to ruin the industry and things are going down in flames and there goes the photography industry. You know what? You just took stock photography and you just built on top of things.
Right.
You comped out images, you comped out ads so that you can go to someone and say something like this. And if it was too expensive, you just bought the image.
Yep.
And this is really what we're seeing with Adobe launched a generative AI images product. It's fantastic. It's perfect. It's a perfect, a lot of our backgrounds that we use for our own marketing materials, we're generating.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that we saw 20 years later, you see all the same photographs being used everywhere. You
Yep.
see, video, you see small snapshots, backgrounds that are just end up people leveraging the same stock photography. It's now an ability of taking images and reusing them, but also they're pretty customizable for you.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you want to spend even just 10 minutes on an image, you can have something that's very unique and exactly what you want.
Yeah, and it's yours. The ownership rights are yours. And because someone else may not use those same words to get exactly like what you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I'm curious too, what kind of where you stand on, like, if somebody is not started integrating AI into their workflow, like what's the one thing they should be paying attention to in this time?
It's funny. I have one of my founders that's in cybersecurity called me and said, "Hey, I want to get your thoughts." He's like, "We're seeing a slowdown in cybersecurity." And I said, "You're absolutely right." And I said, a lot of businesses this year, probably going into next year, they're not going to buy enterprise software. And he was like, "Damn, I felt that." Work through why. And I said, why? Is because all the boards, all the executives, all the customers, what they're telling that business is, what's your AI strategy? And because of that, people have been trying to say, oh, nobody's buying enterprise software because of the election. No one's buying enterprise software because of COVID. No, they're buying it. They're not buying it because they're coming back to the table to say, we've got to do something.
Right.
We've got to go to our, sponsors. We've got to go to our investors. We've got to go to our shareholders with an enterprise strategy in hand. And this year was, all right, we're going to think about it. But two things that are happening at the board level. Boards are now, one, saying, what's my cybersecurity strategy? What's the company's AI strategy? How are we going to make more money? How is it going to save us more money? Everyone's talking about it. What are we going to do about, LLMs? Like, is it useful? And there's no more like, oh, that doesn't affect us anymore. Now
Right.
it's, no, we have to have an opinion and we have to be doing something. And I think the spend next year will be focused on, okay, we've talked about it enough. It's time that we have to spend money on it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I think everybody's just one event away from wishing they had better cybersecurity. So that's always on the plate, but it seems to be a little more reactive at times.
Well, cybersecurity has always been like, you invest in two things, and it's kind of come back to this. There's the endpoints, which are everything that's out there that has an internet, signal, phones, thermometers, whatever's out there, cars, refrigerators. And then there's no in the middle. Then there's the incident report software. You've had an event, something's gone wrong. Shit, I better have software to tell everybody what happened and how to fix it. And we're kind of back at that spot. No one's buying anything in the middle. And I feel very much that we're going to be like that on the AI side. It's going to be like, okay, what's our front end? We're going to skip the whole LLM thing. Maybe we'll use the, maybe not. Oh God, we've got to do something with our data. We've got to do a back. We've got to spend there. So there's kind of these two ends, and it's going to end up being because, what I think the future in the next couple of years is the explainability. We saw this about 3-4 years ago in ad tech, when we saw, now things, ads in Facebook and social coming out. Now we see this is a paid ad. This is what we're not seeing that we're going to end up seeing, because having been in the ad tech business, one of the things is people would ask us this question about PII and is it going to infringe? But what we would hear back from the customers is, yes, I'm worried about my data. I'm worried about, my PII. But if you're taking my data and making it easier for me when I'm buying something or personalizing thing, here you go.
Right.
don't call me back. Just let me know what I want to buy. And
All right.
that's actually like the thing that we're going to get to is how do you explain how you're choosing something for someone? It goes back to the pseudonym approach of BC Puppy is a pseudonym for the senior associate. Like, where did this come from?
Right.
And why
Yeah.
did you choose a pseudonym? Like, that explainability part is something like an ad tech that, 3, 4, 5 years ago came out to explain why am I getting this ad. Now it's going to end up happening on the AI side to be like, why was I offered this? And what's the weight of the decision of where it was made?
Yeah. I like that. I do have one more question. I just saw recently that the FBI was saying that now that we should be encrypting all of our communications, and so even email and texts. So, do you think that we're going to be able to get a retail level software for individuals to be able to encrypt communications and be able to be secure from that recommendation?
It's funny because I read stuff like this and I actually laugh at it.
Yeah.
Having been in the ad tech world, one of my companies, what we did is we took data off phones and then we created segments.
Right.
Who is, a guy who lives in Connecticut who drives a car and owns an iPhone. And then you market to them, Dunkin' Donuts or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
The reality is there's so much, now people are this week, TikTok's going to be banned. They're taking our data. But the reality is the big brands like Facebook and Apple are already taking our data.
Yeah.
Google's microphone is always turned on the Google Maps app. I specifically turned that off. Our data
Right.
is already for sale. It's already
Yeah.
out there. It
Sure.
doesn't matter what text encryptions or what we're doing. People are the horse has already left the barn. It's the limitations are going to have to be on, you know, every other US software provider who's already taking our data, who's always marketing. We used to tell brands when we talked to them, said, hey, you're renting your customers from Facebook because they already
Right.
own your customer's phone number. They already own your customer's email. They own the customer's likeness.
Yep.
They already showed the picture of it. Like, you're worried about PII. Facebook has everything about you, including like how many kids you have, what they look like, what's the picture of your house if you put a picture of your house on there, and when you
Sure.
went on vacation.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, they own Instagram, which figured out what you had for breakfast that day because you took a picture of it.
Posted that. Yeah.
I think we have to take a step back and look at an industry of creating more guidelines like we had done in ad tech to be like, how are we advertising? But really, like, it goes back to the explainability of decisioning. All of this data is going to get sucked in. How you make a chat GPT, a Lambda better is by literally ingesting more conversational data.
Right.
Because this is the issue that we're having now is that when you don't write a question accurately or you do something weird with the question, the higher likelihood that you're going to get a stranger answer.
Yep.
And so it's interesting because though we've opened this box of conversation, until there's more data, like if you were to take someone that was a college student, high school student now, and you ingested all of their text, they're going to write how they're writing in text. A current LLM is not going to understand that because it doesn't understand that, oh, you're Riz or like any
Yeah.
of these terms. It just will say, I don't understand. Like, what does this mean? And that's how
Right.
you get this hallucination.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Adrian, I really appreciate your time this morning, and I feel like we could go on for another couple hours here, but you've been very generous, and I'm appreciative of that. If people want to get in touch with you and talk about AI or security or VC, how do they get in touch with you?
Follow me on LinkedIn. Always post topics about what we're doing and what we're looking at in cybersecurity. This morning, I got asked about the predictions for Fintech. So I've already shared them out to magazines, and I always post that out there. So feel free to follow me. Feel free to connect and learn as we go along, as we're all in this AI journey together.
All right. Well, thanks for your work getting young companies funded and active. I appreciate that too.
Hey, thanks, Emanuel. Thanks for
All
having me
right.
on.
Yeah, you betcha.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.